Yogendra Yadav was someone who stood out and said that he believed there was no way in which the NDA would reach 272. In fact, he predicted the BJP between 240 and about 260. And that's perhaps as close as anyone has come to giving the NDA numbers. And there was this battle between Prashant Kishore, who claimed 300 par easy, versus Yogendra
the other
Yadav.
Interesting thing is Yogendra Yadav said, originally I've given up predictions and projections. Then he started doing it during this election. And hats off, Professor Yadav, you've kind of hit this one out of the park. The pollsters who were on the ground with much larger sample surveys struggled in the end. Yours was more anecdotal. You were traveling, you were trying to collect with very limited resources, and yet you called Uttar Pradesh right, and in that you called the story of this election. So many, many congratulations to you. Tell us, what were you seeing and reading, which all these much wanted pollsters clearly weren't?
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you very much. I don't think these things should be given that much of an importance. I don't think there was any battle with Prashant Kishore. I've actually learnt a lot. He's one of the most astute analysts of politics. Whenever I speak to him, I learn something. All this was media creation. To my mind, pollsters are just postmen. They should not be made centerpiece of it. If they get it right, they are only doing their job. If they don't get it right, there should be some improvement. When they get it right, I don't think dancing in the studio is a very good idea. And when they get it wrong, making someone cry in the studio is also not a good idea. I think all we need is to reflect on this. And you are absolutely right, Rahul. I did not want to do psephology. I had given it up 12 years ago. I don't want to do it. I had to come in as a political activist who saw that the tools of survey were being misused to hoodwink this country in an attempt in which all the major media channels, including yours, was a partner. So I, as a
no, but can I quarrel with that just to say that had we put out pre-poll surveys?
I know you won't like it, Rahul. Why don't you listen to me?
No, but you must hear this also. Had it been a pre-poll study, you could have said, what you could have said would have been true, that this is an attempt to influence the election, that charge could have been applied. This is a post-poll study. This has been put at a time when polling is over. There is no bearing. I mean, the only thing you get is either you get the kudos for getting it right or you get the brickbats for getting it wrong. There's really nothing else at stake. So you can't blame the media for doing a post-poll study, which is really our effort to try and understand how the elections really unfolded, sir.
How did you assume, Rahul, that I was speaking of the exit poll? I was speaking of the coverage by the media throughout this campaign, and when I decided to come back and perform this role, which is about 2 months ago, it was clearly not in response to any post-poll or exit poll. You don't need to be very defensive about it. All I'm saying is that the entire mainstream media of this country was speaking like spokespersons of the BJP. They were campaigning for the BJP. They were creating a mahal of 400 par, more than the BJP was doing. And all the so-called election analysis, and remember, there were lots and lots of pre-poll forecasting going on. Everything had created this impression, आएगा तो मोदी है तो मुमकिन है, 400 par. I kept quiet. I must say I was also somewhat intimidated by all this till I traveled. When I traveled and I saw this was complete nonsense, then I stepped in and said, all right, it's my duty. It may have been my old role. I don't earn my bread from this. And I don't want to be a psephologist. And on your show, I'm announcing, thank you very much, done my duty only once. This is not my role. I don't want to perform it. This is not my scene in life. So I had to do it out of this exigency. I'm glad it was all right. I'm glad I got the range right. But there's always a bit of a fluke in getting it so right. Those who got it wrong, I understand what it feels like to make a forecast and then the whole country to mock at you. I empathize with my friends who may have got it wrong today. Pradeep Gupta has had a very good track record. It's the day today to remember that he's had a very good track record. He got it wrong. It doesn't matter. It happens to all of us. What surprised me were 2 or 3 things. Number one, all the channels were making more or less the same forecast. This normally doesn't happen. Number 2, that many channels up their forecast to include 401, 4011, 411, as if to say कि 400 पार तो हम करवा ही देंगे. That surprised me. And the third thing that surprised me is that channels do not do that elementary declaration about conflict of interest. If, like I do, I come on your channel, I say I'm a political activist who has this position in this election and these are my assessment. Similarly, should it not be all right for all the pollsters to say, I'm principally working for the BJP, here I'm in my capacity as a pollster doing exit poll. This much disclosure should be mandatory. It's mandatory all over the world.
So why do you
instead
think
of focusing on pollsters who should not be the real story, and thank you very much for making me a bit of a story, but I actually don't deserve to be the story.
No,
All we should focus is on improving transparency in polling. That's what we should be focusing on. I happened to get it right, and Rahul, the advantage I had was that I was not burdened with numbers. As you rightly said, a bit of episodic thing travels, so I was cool, I was light, and I could say these things. Those who are carrying serious polls, they are burdened with a lot of numbers, statistical evidence. They have to deal with it, and I don't envy them. So, thank you very much.
But Yogendra Yadav,
it should be put in perspective.
I've heard you well, and I think you make some solid arguments, particularly about the quality of polling at times across pollsters. There are a lot of fly-by-night operators who've also become pollsters, who, as you say, do not disclose maybe whether they have other interests other than polling. But what I wanted to ask you, Yogendra Yadav, was simply this. You know CSDS, for example, you work there as at least an academic research institute. When you look at their vote share also to a large extent paralleled some of the findings of some of the other pollsters. And the sense one got is all these pollsters therefore got something wrong. When all of them go in one direction, and I can only recall, for example, that famous election in Britain where all the pollsters predicted a Neil Kinnock Labour victory and the Conservatives won. Something went drastically wrong with the pollsters. What do you think went drastically wrong with pollsters, including to some extent an academic pollster like CSDS? It doesn't give numbers, but it gave vote share. Yogendra ji, can you hear me? Okay, we're going to try and go back to Yogendra Yadav because I want to understand from Yogendra Yadav exactly what he believes went wrong with the pollsters. Why is it that directionally all these pollsters had predicted one kind of verdict? It's not just Axis My India. Remember, several pollsters across the board and academic pollsters predicted a comprehensive BJP victory. Yes, very quickly.
What I wanted to say is that even in the future, anecdotes will still not be able to replace proper statistics. I mean, one survey gone wrong, or one exit poll's gone wrong, you'll have to again go back to statistics. That is where eventual panacea will lie. Better quality data, better assessments on the ground, better surveys. But anecdotes will remain anecdotes with lesser number of credibility, even in the future.
But I think what the real problem, and I think Yogendra hit on it, there are also a number of fly-by-night operators who become pollsters. And I think disclosure is important. Some of them simply are not disclosing some of the other clients that they may be working for, and we've seen that with polling. Some of them are just putting out numbers. We don't even know what their raw data is, what is the methodology. Unless you do that kind of rigorous polling, the entire... So, Yogendra Yadav, you're back with us. I want to understand whether it's an academic pollster like CSDS or indeed Pradeep Gupta or some other pollsters, all of them got this poll seemingly directionally wrong. CSDS doesn't give numbers, but in terms of vote share. What do you think they got wrong? Was it just Uttar Pradesh and the big states or something more?
Rajdeep, we don't have state-wise breakup from CSDS, so we have to wait to see whether they got it right or wrong. But I think pollsters were making 4 sets of mistakes. One, there was a sampling error, which is to say most pollsters were undersampling the voters who are likely to have voted for India, namely voters who are poor, who are disadvantaged, who are less articulate. Number 2, there was underreporting. Voters who were voting for BJP, for Congress and Samajwadi Party, say in a state like Uttar Pradesh, they were unlikely to report as openly and frankly as others. In my own conversations, I found dozens of conversations that began by saying BJP ko denge, but after 5-7 minutes, they would open up and say, nahi, sawal hi nahi hota, unko to bilkul nahi denge. Pollsters would have missed those responses. It's in the nature of method. It's not their fault. Third, there was a under aggregation when those opinion poll findings are reported and converted into vote share. Many undecided voters were allotted more to BJP than to others based on their understanding. And finally, there was under conversion of votes into seats. Now, normally, Rajdeep, all these 4 mistakes are made by most pollsters. CSDS has the best method because they don't undersample. Because what they do is they draw from random numbers from the voters list. Most other pollsters don't do it, but other mistakes are made by all pollsters all the time. But usually you make one error in one direction, another error in another direction. Errors cancel each other out and you look out quite good. For example, I made today error about Bihar, but I underestimated Uttar Pradesh. Both errors cancelled each other out and you think I made a very good forecast. This happens. In this particular instance, all the 4 mistakes were stacked one upon another. And it led to what looks like a gigantic mistake, which actually is not such an extraordinary thing.
Yogendra ji, if we step away from dissecting the polls to look at how you see the nature of political contestation over the next 5 years change, in your estimate, how is Modi 3.0 likely to be different from what India has seen in the past 10 years? How is the opposition likely to be different, given that Congress is about 100? How is the opposition likely to be different from what we've seen over the past 10 years?
Rahul, today was a very, very big day in India's democracy, and I can only put it in Hindi. आज तंत्र पे लोक की विजय हुई है. You know, the tantra, the system which has been dominating, that system has been, people have triumphed once again. And it's not just a piece of rhetoric. This happens very, very rarely, that a political party which is in command of everything, which has money, which has all the mainstream media, which has the entire establishment, unfortunately even the election commission, that is defeated the way it is. I heard someone talk about celebrating a defeat. And I personally thought what the Prime Minister was doing today was exactly that. It was celebration of frankly, a political defeat. How would it impact?
No, hold on to that. Can I just stop you? No, 1 minute. Yogendra ji, can I just stop you on that? When you say that he's celebrating a political defeat, I heard a commentator from the United Kingdom saying, look, 10 years in power, and you still come back, how does it become a defeat? Look at the gap between 1 and 2, it's still extra. So when you say it's a political defeat, and the opposition is not celebrating a loss, what do you mean?
No, sir, not just gap between 1 and 2. The BJP by itself is more than the entire India bloc put together. So, Yogendra ji, when you answer this question, you will have to keep in mind this fact that the India alliance taken together is at 234. Out of the 291 that the NDA has at this moment, the BJP by itself is 239. BJP individually 5 more than the entire India alliance taken together.
That too when you take TMC along.
Yogendra Yadav.
Thanks for the effort, Rahul, that you have put into all this mathematics. I have done numbers, and one of the things that I have learned from trying to do political numbers is that political numbers make sense in the political context. So Rajdeep, the British analyst or whoever told you after 10 years these things happen, he probably doesn't live in India. There's a very different context to it, and all of us know it. Rajdeep, you know it. Rahul, you know it. And every one of the audience knows it. In this was not a normal contest. Here is a contest where there is a stranglehold over power, where there is, in terms of money, BJP had probably, 10, 20, 100 times more money that they were spending on this election than anyone else. That they had the entire media of this country lined up as their spokesperson. I think the British person may not have ever seen it, so he may not be familiar with all these things. They normally, in normal, healthy democracies, you don't have such servile media as we've had in this country for the last 10 years. That all the institutions of governance were aligned, and that the election commission was playing a disgraceful role. They must not have seen all that. It is in this context and the announcement of 400 par and the entire media echoing 400 par, and till day before yesterday we were discussing 400 par. In that context, getting 240, 30 seats below majority is defeat. There is no other word for it. I know it must be very hard to take it for many people, but I think it's time we begin to realize, Rahul, that reality has changed. Something has happened in the last 12 hours, Rahul. I really want you to begin to believe these things.
Even though you will have 5 more years, you're saying this even though we will have 5 more years of Prime Minister Modi. We will probably still have 5 more years of Prime Minister Modi, Yogendra Yadav.
There is a difference, Rajdeep, between forming the government and having a popular mandate. Very often governments lose a popular mandate, but they still manage to form governments. Of course he would run a government. I'm not saying his government is, if he forms. As of now, he has not. And all this talk about Mr. Modi becoming Prime Minister for the third time is absolutely premature. Those who know anything about legality, those who know anything about how governments are formed should not be saying all this today. They can say it the day after tomorrow when the formality is completed. But more importantly, yes, he would have government. But there's something called Iqbal. I don't know the right expression in Hindi, in English for that. Governments have Iqbal. They have certain legitimacy. They have certain aura that actually gives government power to get things done. This would be government minus Iqbal. And that is where the difference is. And for that, I see many positives coming from that, Rajdeep, if I can quickly say that. Number one, I find, as Rahul has anticipated, opposition to be more vocal. I expect the opposition to actually get space to speak in the parliament, which was not the case earlier. I really expect the media to open up, and such a lovely sight it would be if the media in this country were to start speaking. I mean, I see many captions running on your channel even today, which must have been designed yesterday anticipating 320 seats for the BJP, but reality has changed. I'm really hoping that media would wake up. They would find some voice. I do expect the judiciary also to find greater courage, can I say, or greater attention to the letter and spirit of Constitution, something that has been somewhat blurred over the last few years. I do expect democratic institutions to open up, and above all, I expect protests, movements, and resistance to strengthen. And that, please don't get frightened, this is the best thing that can happen to a democracy. And this country was born out of an Andolan. The PM doesn't quite realize it. But Andolans becoming strong, democratic resistance becoming strong is a lovely idea. So today is a lovely day. We have seen opening of democracy. Tantra has been subdued by Lok for a moment. Let's cherish that moment and let's hope something really good would come out of it.
Yogendra Yadav, as I've said, I've known you for years, and I think one of the great skills you have is bringing in various thoughts and putting it in a very concise manner. I appreciate you joining me. I can only say some of us have spoken at some cost over the years, but we will leave that for another debate and speak about that on another day. I appreciate you joining us.